Welcome to Andy Staples on 3. At least that's the name for today. We might be changing it again. We don't know. We might sell the naming rights to this show. Who knows? Listen, there's always revenue streams out there. We are for sale here, people. You've seen us shill products on this thing. It's what we do. So, are we any different than the Big 12? I don't think so. Let's talk about that. Because that was the headline on Thursday, even though it was maybe not the most interesting piece of Big 12 news on Thursday. The Big 12 may be selling its naming rights to Allstate. I know I'm in good hands when Pete Nakos comes on. So, Pete, we got to talk about this. There are many different ways to handle this. There are many different ways to do this, but let's just start with a couple of potential names. Like, if you're going to sell the name of the Big 12, you're going to call it the Allstate 12, the Allstate Conference, Conference Allstate, the Allstate League. What do we do?
I like, was it the Allstate Conference? I'm a fan of that one.
Allstate Conference. Yeah. Allstate 12, you can't do. They haven't had 12 schools since 2011. Like, that would be silly. Yeah. Like, the 12 means nothing.
Not a fan of that one. So, I would be okay if they wanted to rebrand and just go like Allstate, is it 16? Yeah.
Allstate 16 would be good. Like, yeah. I remember one of the few things that Larry Scott probably got right as the commissioner of the Pac-12. I remember sitting with him as they were going from the Pac-10 to the Pac-12, and he's like, of course we're going to change it to 12 because we have 12 schools now. Why wouldn't we do that?
Yeah, and never even mind. We don't have to get into the Big Ten conversation. But anyways, so this Allstate news broke yesterday. Ross Dellinger first reported it. I confirmed it with some sources later on about Allstate being the leading candidate right now to land the title sponsor rights to the Big 12. And Andy, you and I have spent so much time on this show talking about how the TV revenue disparities when it comes to the Big Ten and the SEC against everyone else. Brett Yormark does not come from a college athletics background. He worked at the Barclays Center. He's really business thinking, forward thinking about how to get more revenue into the conference. He did his own thing this last year where he launched his own NFL combine. And now he's going to try to go get some naming rights for his conference, which could bring in, it sounds about 30 million to 50 million a year, give or take. And those dollars will trickle down to schools. And when there's such a need for money right now, when it comes to the television revenue disparity, I mean, it's a really, really smart idea.
Well, and so I do think this is a good idea. We got our jokes off yesterday, and I had people say, well, it looks like a poverty conference doing this. And what's 2 or 3 million per school? 2 or 3 million per school. I hate to say it and be simplistic about it like that, is 2 or 3 million per school. Like, Pete, if I could get you $2 million extra dollars a year for something that isn't going to change your life very much, would you do it?
Yes.
And I mean, that's the thing. And I think people don't understand that. Like, these schools need to find ways to make this money. They are not the SEC or the Big Ten. They do not have these massive TV deals pumping money this way. They are about to have to spend millions more a year. Like, if they want to opt into the House versus the NCAA settlement and pay up to 21.6 million is the number right now. Yep. If they want to pay up to that, they are going to have to find ways to find that money. Now, they're going to have to cut it out of their budgets in some ways. They're going to have to add revenue streams in other ways. And so, like, here's my thing with the Big 12, with the name, the Big 12. This is not like The Wire, Marlo Stanfield, my name is my name. This is a name of a conference that when you think of that conference and the history of that conference to this point, all you think of is chaos. You think of strife, of infighting. Like, when the conference was born, it was Nebraska against everybody. Then it was Texas against Texas A&M. Nebraska and Colorado leave. Texas A&M and Missouri leave. David Boren, the Oklahoma president, says they're psychologically disadvantaged. They said the one true champion advertising campaign, and then crown 2 football champions. That night ends with Bob Bowlesby on stage trying to hand a trophy to Art Briles, who is just yelling at him. Like, the Big 12 name does not have a great storied history in the world of college football. Like, it can go away and no one would care. Like, it wouldn't affect UCF or Iowa State, like the current members of the Big 12. So you can sell that. Like, would you sell the would you make it the Golden Flake SEC? No, of course you wouldn't. But in this case, the Allstate something or other might be the way to go.
Yeah, and we get back to this idea too of this television revenue. I mean, that has a lot to do with it. Beyond that too, Andy, you and I were talking about this before the show. These presidents are going to have to vote on it, just like you do with like a television rights deal. These presidents are going to want a very safe brand to sponsor their conference. Allstate makes a lot of sense. Yes, I was about to mention that, Willie Thomas. Yes, if they can't get Southwest Airlines to outbid them and name it the Southwest, I saw that on Twitter yesterday.
It was a guy named Landon put this thing on Twitter, and it's tremendous. He's got the Southwest logo and the Big 12 logo, and he's like, call it the Southwest Conference. It would be so good. Now, I do think like somebody probably still owns the Southwest Conference marks.
Probably.
I think.
Definitely.
But it would be tremendous if they could do that. I would absolutely love that. Ryan says it's disgusting. Is it though? But it's funny you mentioned that Brett Yormark used to work at the Barclays Center. Barclays, which used to sponsor the Premier League. Now, the Premier League in English soccer has not had a title sponsor, I think, for 8 years. But originally, it was the Barclays Premier League, and the bank Barclays paid them tons of money to have the name in front. Now, they don't do it anymore, probably because I don't think the companies that were putting their name in front got the bang for their buck because everybody just called it the Premier League. Now, this I think would be. You're not calling this the Big 12 presented by or some conference name.
Right.
Like, you're putting the name in it, just like when they made the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl the Chick-fil-A Bowl, so you would say Chick-fil-A. Like, that's what they're going to do. Now, it's funny. It's probably the wrong insurance company, because if you went nationwide, like the nationwide conference would actually be a fairly accurate descriptor.
Yeah, I like the idea of Aflac so we can get a mascot on the field.
And the synergies with Coach Prime would be tremendous. You've already got your number one pitch man working in the league.
Exactly. It'd be phenomenal.
So let's discuss why that particular piece of news was floated, because it was in a very organized way floated on Thursday.
It was.
It was a lot of sources. But there's a lot of people having their sources call them at the same time. And the other thing that was interesting about the Big 12 that was floated on Thursday, and this was a story that Dennis Dodd initially wrote. Oh, hold on. Willie's cooking. We're going to let Willie cook. How about the Good Hands Conference and hire all the air raid OCs to give out weekly bonuses for the highest scoring team each week? I like this.
That's good, Willie.
Listen, Willie is one of our best idea people. Like Willie is taken to asking Dear Andy questions pretty much every day in the email. And so we're just corresponding back and forth now. And then Nathan has one. The problem is what happens when the company stops supporting the conference. You need to change the name every 10 years like they do with pro stadiums. Yes, possibly. Like, that is a real possibility. That is something you do have to worry about. I think it. Now, I will say, given the shifting nature of the Big 12 throughout its history, that's probably not a bad thing. Like, maybe you need a refresh. But Pete, I was talking about this with somebody yesterday. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Like, we're weird about this stuff. We're weird about names, weird about that. Remember when Crypto.com bought the naming rights to the arena in Los Angeles that had a really cool name before? It was a Staples Center. Yeah. And remember when Acrisure bought the naming rights to the football stadium in Pittsburgh, which was named after a ketchup company? Like, people got mad about that. How dare you not have an arena named after Andy Staples? I didn't get mad, but people got mad.
Tons of people.
Tens. There are tens of us. But like, seriously, the ketchup bottle, they forced them to keep the ketchup bottle on the stadium in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Because people were that attached to the freaking ketchup bottle. So like that, everybody's like, this is sacred. You can't change your name. You can't sell it. Listen,
you can't.
You'll get attached to whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really forward thinking. And as we transition, we're going to talk about private equity here in a minute. The idea of giving away the title sponsor of a conference makes a lot more sense to me than bringing in private equity and opening up to so many different things can happen in that situation.
Yeah, and that's the other piece of news that was floated. Dennis Dodd writes a column that basically the Big 12 is also exploring selling a 15 to 20% stake in the conference to a private equity firm in Luxembourg that would then give them a cash infusion of $800 million to $1 billion. But there's so many questions about that. I was talking to some people yesterday, and like one of the questions one of the people asked me, and I don't have an answer for this. I imagine Larry Scott has an answer for this because he actually explored this with the Pac-12 years ago. But the conference is a not-for-profit organization that essentially exists as a revenue pass-through. So the TV rights money, the bowl money, all that money, or the NCAA tournament money comes through the conference and is passed along to the school. So in the case of the Big 12, 16 schools, 13 of them are public schools. Like, can you sell a piece of that? Are you even allowed to sell a piece of that?
And yet again, we talk about this, and there are going to be a lot of hoops to jump through for this to happen. This is not going to be, yet again, presidents are going to have to sign off. I've talked to some sources, and I'm sure you have too. There are some presidents who are really held up about the idea of getting into private equity. And then it brings on this conversation: is it private equity where these firms get a piece of a school, or is it private capital, which is what former Florida State quarterback Drew Weatherford's doing with the Redstone firm? And they're saying that they want to put capital into an institution, and they don't want to own a piece of it, but they want to try to make their money back over a set period of time.
Hold on, and I say this as someone who covered Drew as a great high school quarterback at Land O'Lakes High in Pasco County, Florida. Right, like all of these people want to make their money back. They're not. Yeah, this is not a charity. Like none of this. Imagine getting $1 billion. And I was thinking about this because now if you buy a car, if you buy a house, the paperwork is such that they've made laws that the paperwork has to show you exactly how much you're paying with interest over the life of the loan. So if you buy a house for $300,000 and you finance like 80% of that, you'll see that you're paying probably depending on the interest rate over $1 million by the time you've paid for 30 years. Like, what does that look like for $1 billion? Like, what is the expected return? How fast do they want it back? Like, I'm not sure that these people are ready for this.
What if the Big 12 doesn't exist in a decade? What if conference realignment comes when the Big 10 contracts are up with Fox and CBS and there's more conference realignment? Who's on the hook for that $1 billion?
These are great questions. These are all questions that have to be answered. And I will say the other thing, I don't think the athletic directors and the people who work in athletic departments are ready for is the style of management that comes in when you let private equity into your particular hen house. Because I say this as someone who worked at multiple newspapers, who's seen it happen. We've seen it happen in our industry up close and personal. Like, they do not care. They're not, like I said, it's not a charity. They are there to make money. And like I wrote this in a column yesterday, like most athletic departments are pretty bloated in terms of staff. Like, they're run like the neighborhood lemonade stand. That is not how these guys operate. They will slash, they will burn. You will not like it. It will be very unpleasant. And I think that it's interesting because that is what these people are trying to avoid by trying to get all this cash. They're trying to avoid having to downsize or right size or whatever you want to call it because they've got to pay all this money to the players, they're going to have to cut from the athletic department budget. They're going to have to cut staff. They know that, and they don't want to do it. But the problem is, all you're doing is kicking the can down the road if you take this money now, because somebody's going to come in and tell you to do it after that.
Yeah. So I went to NACTA this week. I was there Tuesday in
Yeah.
Vegas and talked to some administrators, talked to some industry sources, and athletic directors right now are talking about the idea of like, okay, with revenue sharing, are we going to have to cut sports? That seems more of a threat at the moment than a reality, but it could be a reality in the next 12 to 18 months. If you bring private equity in, as Andy just outlined, they are going to boss around. They are going to tell you what to do. And there's probably a higher percentage that they tell you to cut sports than if you don't go into private equity.
Yeah, because they'll be like, which of these sports make money? And they'll be like, football and men's basketball. And they'll go cut everything else. And you'll go, well, no, we there's this thing called Title IX. And they'll go cut exactly what you need to comply with Title IX and have nothing more than that. Like, that's what they're going to say. It's all
about the bottom line.
Yeah.
It's all about the bottom line.
Yeah. So it is a pretty dangerous situation. It's a dangerous path to go down. And so this was because you know how my mind works, Pete. Anytime somebody floats stuff, I'm like, okay, what is the underlying reason for this happening now?
Yeah.
And the fact that both of these things were floated on the same day, my initial thought was, oh, they're trying to show this the shiny object, which is selling the conference naming rights to Allstate. And then they're going to okey doke with the private equity. And then I talked to somebody else who is much smarter than me and has been in the business a lot longer than me in college sports. And this person said, no, it's the other way around. The naming rights thing probably feels like sacrilege to all these presidents. But then when you put it next to the private equity thing where you're basically selling a piece of yourself and then you're going to let all these people come in and boss you around, that doesn't seem so bad for $3 million a year. So that made more sense to me when I thought about it that way.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And had some conversations. People think these conversations with Allstate are like they've been going on. This did not start on Monday and then it got leaked on Thursday. So it will be interesting. And the other really interesting thing too, Andy, we don't have to dive into this too much, but Conference USA is also exploring this, I believe, with Global Health, it's called. Does every group of five conference get into this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, those schools are badly going to need if they can get another $1 or $2 a year. And a lot of them are grappling with the idea right now of, are they even going to revenue share? So don't be stunned if in the next year, the MAC, the CUSA, Sunbelt, all have title sponsors.
I'm thinking of the Sunbelt right now. Can we call it the Golden, would Golden Corral buy it? The ultimate football buffet. Come on. Tell me that doesn't work. There's got to be, I guarantee there's a Golden Corral in every Sunbelt town. Guarantee.
I can tell you there's a Tim Hortons all across the MAC.
That's true. Tim Hortons would be a great MAC sponsor. You know, everybody goes with Rotel. I think that they initially like that, but Tim Hortons is good. Culver's a little too Indiana based because the MAC's a little more Ohio and Michigan. Like
Ball State on-field sponsor though could be in play.
True. Yeah, we got the on-field logos, got the jersey logo, and here's what I said in my column about this because I know everybody gets upset about this. I think you just go case by case. Like there are certain schools and uniforms and fields where you should not sully them with branding. Like Penn State's uniform needs to be Penn State's uniform, the way it looks. Auburn's uniform, Alabama's uniform. But look, if you're Oklahoma State, you have 30 different uniforms. And who cares? Like have Pistol Pete holding a sign on your helmet. It doesn't matter.
I mean, Oregon's got it really easy. They just make the nice.
Yeah, but we already know what the brand is. Yeah. And by the way, all these other schools, including the Penn State uniform and the Alabama uniform, also advertising that brand.
Yes, very much so.
So Parlay Joe, Bucky's SEC. I mean, SEC is a Texas conference now because it's got A&M and Texas. Bucky's has expanded into Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, Georgia. Boy, what a blow to the Big 12 that would be.
I did see an SEC logo floated on social media last night made out of waffles, and that gave me a good laugh.
Yeah. Waffle House SEC would be tremendous. Somebody in the SEC texted me and said the old line, because I had said, Golden Flake, Texas Pete, those are the old line SEC sponsors. They sponsored the SEC for years and years, and they said they're just not big enough anymore. So, like, unfortunately, the SEC is, and the SEC maybe past Waffle House. Like, the SEC is into Delta and Coca-Cola. Like, that's where the SEC is.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
So we gotta, before we let you go, Pete, we do have to talk about something on Capitol Hill, actual action on Capitol Hill regarding a law or a proposed law regarding college sports. We saw a bill get out of committee. It's going to the House floor. It's called the Protecting Student Athletes something opportunity. Basically, when they say protecting, they mean limiting. The title of the bill is a complete lie. It's they would like to restrict athletes by not allowing them to ever become employees of the university. This is clear what the schools want. This is not a bipartisan bill. It is the Republicans say yes, the Democrats say no. But Republican majority in the House.
Yeah.
Presumably it's going to pass the House.
Yeah. So it's actually called, Andy, the Protecting Student Athletes Economic Freedom Act. Very on point there.
Wait, how do you protect my freedom by limiting my options?
Yeah. So it went through on a 23-16 party line vote yesterday in the House Committee for Education and the Workforce. So the very, I feel like I'm about to like talk like I'm just a bill video, but so it now goes to the House floor, and on the House floor it can be discussed, voted on, and amended. If it does get through the House, which there's actually a chance it does because it is a Republican.
This is going to get tacked onto something else, right? This is going to be a rider on something else.
It's called a rider bill, so it's definitely going to get tacked onto something else. But if it were to make it through the House, which I don't want to say it's likely or not, but it is Republican controlled, so there could be another party line vote. It then would go to the Senate. We could see Senator Chris Murphy filibuster it too in the Senate. So we'll be interested to see how it plays out. People have already said that President Joe Biden would never would veto it. I don't think it's going to go that far. I think this election's coming. Everyone keeps emphasizing to me how everything slows down on the Hill when we get to election season. So this is because
they're all running. Well, all the House members are running for election.
Yeah,
and some of the senators.
I will say this, and then we can open it up a little bit more. If the Republicans take the White House, the House, and the Senate, which is on the table at the moment,
right,
we could definitely see a piece of legislation like this get through and put into law.
Yeah, and here's the thing, like, just because Congress passes the law doesn't necessarily mean that's what it's going to be. But I would say if it does pass, the likelihood of athletes becoming employees becomes less likely for a time. Like this would get challenged. It would wind up in the court system. It would go to the Supreme Court. Because I know, you're thinking, like, because you may be thinking, okay, why would Republicans support this? Because aren't they for open markets? And you just have to remember where all the allegiances are, because Republicans tend to not want to give organized labor what it wants. So this would be dealing a blow to organized labor. And also it would be helping out your local state U that is asking you for help. So that's why they are behind this. And then if that were to pass, it would probably get in court. And look, the conservatives in the court they're not running for re-election. So they go more along like straight philosophical lines, like go with Brett Kavanaugh's concurring opinion in the Alston case, where he's like, the NCAA sucks. You bring this to us, we're going to kill it. Like, there's a good chance if that were to get that far, that law would be struck down. But that would take years and years and years and years. And another thing, Pete, you and I have talked about this a bunch of times. Right now, the situation for athletes is as good as it will ever be.
Yes.
If they are not allowed to become employees, I do think that limits the capability of collective bargaining. Now, maybe there can be some sort of carve out for that. But if you limit collective bargaining, if they can't ever collectively bargain with the schools, the schools can never actually cap what they make.
Bingo. Yes.
So there is that. Now, if I were an athlete, if I were a person trying to organize the athletes into a bargaining block,
yeah,
I would not want this, because I don't think it's a good precedent for the schools to just be able to tell Congress, here's what we want, and then it happens. Because then they'll just make more laws.
The other thing, too, is this bill says in one of its first sentences how federal and state laws would supersede it, which is very fascinating. And the other thing, too, that this legislation doesn't include at the moment is any antitrust exemption. So we talk about further lawsuits and stuff. If this goes through, it would open. Yeah, it would definitely be brought back to court. So if it does get attached to a larger piece of legislation, which we probably won't see till January 2025, we'll be fascinated to see how that plays out. And does that bill include the antitrust exemption that the NCAA has long sought?
My guess is no, but we shall see. And like you said, probably nothing happens till after the election. Yeah. Then we see what the makeup of the Congress is. We see who's in the White House. It changes a lot of the dynamics of everything.
Yes.
And so possibly the first Wednesday in November, we'll have a much better idea of what this is going to look like. So
totally.
That's as much politics as we're going to get into on this show. But Pete, so what your vote? Let's review. What are we voting? Because we think Allstate's the brand.
We do, yes.
The Big 12 rebrands. We call it the Allstate Conference Allstate. How are we doing this?
I support Conference Allstate.
Conference Allstate sounds good, especially if Conference USA changes its name.
Yes, I agree. I would also support like the Allstate 14 or 16. I need to go do some quick counting, and then I can.
It's 16. Hold 16. On, I've got I've got it for you right here. There they all are.
Yeah, see, and you could just replace that Big 12 logo, and you could definitely do the Allstate 16. We'll do it for you.
Yeah, I don't know. I know there are people in the league who think that 12 is precious and that look. It does not mean anything. Sorry. Like the Big 10, I realize that is numerically incorrect as well, but that brand means something. The Big 12 brand means we're going to have a fist fight in one of our meetings. Like that's what it means to most people.
Yeah.
So I think just you got to let that go.
Yes, 100%.
Pete Nakos, thank you so much. This is awesome. Love it. And I'm gonna miss you while I'm on vacation. Can I just text you every once in a while? Be like, okay, please what's happening now?
Please do. And I hope you also step away from your phone.
I might for a few minutes. But possibly. Here's the thing. Pete, I'd be talking about this stuff anyway.
Yeah.
So what what's the difference?
Exactly. Well, I'll be your outlet. Just let me know.
I appreciate it, Pete. Thank you so much. Pete Nakos, the great Pete Nakos. And now it is time to talk EA Sports College Football 25. That's right. It is time for video game intel. Because here's the thing. You guys were so curious about every aspect of the game when I got to go play it in Orlando. And I was overwhelmed by the questions. And so we did a couple of shows where I talked about everything. And then I did one where I answered questions and you were bringing up things that I didn't even remember from when I went. Somebody asked me about the checkerboard kneeling. And I was like, oh, wait, yeah, there is checkerboard kneeling. I do need to tell everybody about that. So we got to figure that out. But there are so many different aspects to this. It's amazing what they've been able to do here. And it's also amazing how many questions everybody has. And it's just everybody's excited. It's been so long since we got to play the game. So let's talk about what happens in this game. And so what we're showing on the screen now, this is from the original trailer. It's a lot of the entrances, stuff like that. This is a lot of the pageantry piece of it. They released a video last week with a little deeper dive into the gameplay. And so I wanted to talk about that because there are a lot of things that are new or different that we're going to have to get used to. Like I noticed in one clip here, and I'll show it to you on the screen now. You see the new kicking gauge. Like it's this thing that goes back and forth, and then there's an arrow that you can then move. I'll show it again. This is very quick, but you're going to have to get used to that, because I'm sure if you've been playing Madden, you're used to the kind of half circle one where you got to get the thing up into the right zone and then bring it back. But this kicking gauge is new. That's something that's going to be different. And then the wear and tear thing, they explained that to us, and I was trying to take as many notes as I could. They showed us slides, but I wasn't quite sure exactly what everything was going to mean. They explain it a little better, I feel like, in the video. So here's a little clip of what's going on. Now, this is basically they're saying every hit matters, the way every hit hits each player. And this is just a case of more computing power in the current systems. They've got different tackles, different hits affect players differently. And so, like, they'll tell you, hey, this guy is on the verge of getting injured, and prompt you on the screen, do you want to substitute? By the way, poor Jackson Arnold taken a stray in the deep dive video there with him on the field at the Cotton Bowl. But they will tell you, hey, you need to substitute this guy. Can you just, but here's the thing, you're going to see how different those guys are, because in college football, the player quality drops considerably from starter to backup for a lot of teams. And now certainty, like Georgia, Alabama, probably not as much, but that is one thing they talked about when I was there, is they really want to make sure that you feel the difference in how good players are. So that's one thing that is going to be pretty front and center. So like this wear and tear thing, if you've got a guy who's about to go out, you got to be very careful. And, especially a back, it also it's made to affect your play calling. The guy they show is Phil Maffa, the Clemson back. And so if you run Phil Maffa a bunch of times and they say his injury risk is very serious, you got to decide, hey, do I sub him out, or do I just call some different plays for a little while to try to get that back down? And then, but also it lasts through the season if you're in dynasty mode. So you have to be very careful how you use these guys, trying to make it, more realistic. Now, sometimes they do things that are realistic that just, I think they're just picking on people. So I was watching the gameplay deep dive and noticed this little clip. What's that? Oh, that's Trevor Etienne about to score a touchdown against Florida for Georgia. Trevor Etienne transferred from Florida to Georgia this offseason. Like, you don't have to include that in your gameplay deep dive unless you just want to twist the knife on some folks. Now, I will say Georgia and Florida appear pretty frequently in that video, so it's not that. But Kevin says, I hope the wear and tear doesn't get overdone, because players can take quite a bit of hits. But I think that what this is trying to encourage you to do is not have the same guy take, like, if you got a dominant running back, they don't want you being able to hand it to him 35 times in a game with 6-minute quarters. Like, that's just not realistic. You wouldn't actually do that in real life. And it reminds me, I don't know how many of you guys remember the Sega Genesis game Cyberball. It was one of my favorites. It's robot football essentially, and you would get. I think you got a budget to build players. There was a way to build players, and you had limited resources, and you could decide how you wanted to allocate them. But what everybody would always do is you'd build this great quarterback who is incredibly fast, and he'd just be able to, direct snap, just take off, score a touchdown. He'd be good for like 2 touchdowns. And then he'd blow up. So if you wanted to win a game, you'd make your quarterback this way. You'd take your 14-0 lead with him, and he would get hit on the third drive and explode. And then you would have this pedestrian offense that maybe you could score 1 touchdown. Like, you mount 1 touchdown drive the rest of the game, but you would hope that got you through. Jeffrey says, the one thing I haven't seen with Florida State is there is no Renegade and Chief Osceola entrance. Now, okay, two things. It's just Osceola, not Chief Osceola. And yes, Osceola does ride in on a Renegade and does plant the flaming spear. I have seen that in the game. When I was in Orlando, I played a game that started, that was in Doak Campbell, and it does begin with that. So they absolutely have that. Nathan says, will this end up taking away from the pure and simple playability? Making it more complicated can take away the magic. I do think there's going to be a way you can set it where you take some of the realism elements out so you can have an arcade style, let's just play. Parlay Joe says the wear and tear is going to keep the Madden heads out. That's going to be interesting to see how the Madden people react to this, because they're not going to like that Sam Houston State cannot compete with Alabama if you're on the right skill level. Like if you're playing on the easy level, you can play as Sam Houston State and probably score on Alabama. But if you're playing at the level you should be playing, they've made it so it'd be very difficult for you to be competitive in that game. Jonathan says, you said you played as Liberty. Can you elaborate on stadium, jerseys, presentation, etc.? I played as Liberty on the road. So I didn't get a look at their stadium and their entrance. I was trying to look at as many kind of big, like Power 5 home field advantage atmospheres as I could. And so that's why. Speaking of home field advantage, they made a big deal out of it, and they should. So here's what some of the home field advantage looks like. You see the squiggly lines and what it's going to mean when you're trying to play. Like the controller is very much shaking. Everything is harder. And so here's where the attributes of the player come in, and they show this example in the game. So they've got the field general is one of the things they have, and you see Quinn Ewers. Now he's at home. He can see things popping up. They had another thing with the home field advantage where they show the difference between a quarterback who doesn't necessarily have the traits to perform well on the road, or is young and hasn't been in that situation before. And I think it's interesting. The example they use is going to make people mad. The example they use is the quarterback who doesn't necessarily have those traits yet is Nico Iamaleava. See, I'm getting it right. Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee playing against Georgia. And so obviously that's a very hostile environment. He's going to be in his first year as a full-time starting quarterback. So they have Nico, not being able to manage the road environment. And then they show Carson Beck against Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and he does have the ability to negotiate that environment. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And I did play, I played at Penn State, I played at Iowa, I played at Florida, I played at Clemson. And in most of those games, I was playing as the road team. And it is different how the quarterback reacts. Like they give you more pre-snap information, basically the more veteran and cool and collected your quarterback is. So that's the trick there. Kieran says, what are your top 3 schools for Dynasty? So I declared when General Booty went in the transfer portal from Oklahoma that wherever he wound up was going to be my number 1 Dynasty mode team. So Louisiana Monroe is the one I want to start with. But I kind of think like Kennesaw State, because they're the newest FBS team. So that's the, take them the farthest, I think would be good. And then I wouldn't mind just another Sun Belt team. I don't know if you guys have noticed from listening to the show, but I really, really enjoy Sun Belt football. I love the lineup that they've put together with a bunch of schools that care deeply about football, not necessarily worrying about what metro market they're in. Because I think people in Statesboro, Georgia, and people in Boone, North Carolina care deeply about college football. They care deeply about Georgia Southern and Appalachian State. James Madison fans are the same way. Marshall fans are the same way. So that's the one I think. So I think maybe Georgia Southern. I think Georgia Southern would be a lot of fun. And maybe I go back into the triple option with Georgia Southern. Obviously, Clay Helton's not running it in real life now, but yeah, it's going to be very different. DJ Senior asks, we know we cannot edit real players' ratings, and that's true because this. It's funny because this is where reality collides with our virtual video game world. You can't edit real players' ratings because real players, they're protecting their name, image, and likeness. Like they have made a name, image, and likeness deal with EA Sports. And so EA Sports has to make their likeness as realistic as possible. So if you took, the third string guard and made him a 99 overall, well, that's not realistic. But also if you took, say, like Will Campbell, the starting left tackle at LSU, who's going to have a very high rating, like he'll be in the high 90s. If you took him and somehow made his rating 65, like that would not be right because that's not who he is. But so can you edit game generated players' ratings in Dynasty mode? I believe you can. You can also create your own and load them in. Go Gadget said, did you get a good look at Davis Wade Stadium? I actually did play about a quarter and a half at Mississippi State because one of the people at EA Sports said, hey, you're gonna want to hear the cowbells. And you could hear them. Like it was real between plays. The cowbells are real. And so like Davis Wade Stadium, the home field advantage is a little more like, I think people who don't watch Mississippi State or have not, followed the SEC very closely may not understand that stadium when the cowbells are going is actually a very difficult place to run your offense. And I think EA Sports actually did a good job of figuring that out. I was pretty pleased with the way that worked out. One other thing I want to show you guys. So here's the picture in picture. So when you're selecting plays, you're going to get to see what's going on the screen. Now, the image they showed in that deep dive video is not really representative of what it's going to look like during the game. This was more like at the beginning of the game. So they've got a generic stadium shot. But what you're going to see in there, and you're going to have to be careful as you select plays, because a lot of the stuff going on, because they've tried to make this as much like a college football broadcast as possible. So like you just got a turnover. So now you're trying to select your next offensive play. Well, in that picture in picture, you're going to be like, if you've got a turnover prop, say you're Oregon State, and you've got the turnover chainsaw, you're going to see the turnover chainsaw. So you might don't get caught watching the turnover chainsaw when you should be picking your play. That's also where you're going to get your crowd reaction shots, your surrender cobras and all that stuff, your coach shots. So, which not nearly as much fun, the coach shots, until they actually get the coaches in the game, but that's going to happen. Willie Willie, this is cold. If you're the head coach for Colorado, do you have an option to do in-home visits with recruits? Yeah, unlike Coach Prime, you can do in-home visits with recruits. It is quite possible. That would be tremendous if you couldn't. That would be very realistic. But again, they don't have the real coaches in the game. So the truth says, is recruiting the same as CFP 14, or you get to make home visits? What about the coaching staff? They just randomly hire the guy. One is your OC, you get to pick your coordinators. And you also have to decide if you want to fire your coordinators. So that's an important thing every year. You've got to manage that a little more. The recruiting, it seems like most of the decision making and the resource allocation in recruiting is more toward how much do you allocate toward the transfer portal versus how much do you allocate for recruiting out of high school, which is a great real life situation. Touchdown TV says, did you play at Williams-Brice Stadium? If so, is 2001 in the game? What about the Rooster Crow at that third down? I'm sure they've got the Rooster Crow. I didn't play in Williams-Brice. I would imagine that the theme from 2001 is in the game because that is a public domain song. So, like, they don't have Enter Sandman because it would be very expensive to license Enter Sandman just for that one Virginia Tech entrance, and you're not using it anywhere else. Now, they use the Kerncraft 400 song by Zombie Nation because that so many different schools use that. But like they didn't get Seven Nation Army, which I thought enough schools use Seven Nation Army that you could probably get that. But apparently it's also a little bit different licensing if you wanted to actually play the White Stripes version of Seven Nation Army or have the crowd chanting Seven Nation Army. But the theme from 2001, which, by the way, I believe it's called Sprach Zarathustra, is the real name for it. I believe that's public domain at this point, I think. I'll have to have an intellectual property attorney fact check me on that. So that's an interesting one, because that is one of the more fun entrances in college football. And I'm curious to see if they have that. So, all right. Are you able to switch the abilities up to, and do all 11 guys have the same opportunity to get abilities, including the Atlantic Jet Life? I'm glad you asked this question. There's a lot of abilities in this game, a lot of new abilities that we're going to have to get used to. And yes, offensive linemen can get abilities. I don't know if you can switch them. I know with the actual players, you can't change the real life player stuff. But I put on screen a bunch of these abilities, and it may be too small for you to read some of these. There's a bunch of them. Like, you've got aftershock, adrenaline, 50-50, 360. And I don't know what a lot of these mean. Like, they explained a few of them to us, but like house call, that's somebody with breakaway speed. Blow up, I think that's somebody that can make good tackles in the backfield. Magician, that's probably a quarterback that has good escapability. Outside disruptor, that's probably a good edge rusher. Option king, that's obviously going to be a quarterback who runs the option very well. Jammer would be a corner who jams receivers on the outside. Best friend with a little 3 on it would be your third down best friend, your very reliable possession receiver. Robber would probably be a safety that's great at ball, jumping in front and grabbing an interception, playing the ball more than playing the guy, or being able to bait quarterbacks into making interceptable throws. Mega leg, I would imagine, is a punter situation. If Torrey Taylor were in the game, I'm sure he'd have one of those. Headstrong, we know what that is. Headstrong is this person is mentally unflappable. If your quarterback is headstrong, when you play in a tough road environment, he's going to be more apt to handle the situation. You're going to get more information pre-snap. Extender, that would be a quarterback who can extend plays. So there is a lot of attributes, and players can have up to 8. So that's quite a bit. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I can't wait to see what you guys think. I'm going to show you a couple more clips. The option was fun for me. And I told you guys the option's a little bit different in this game, because it's not press X immediately to hand off to the dive back. It is the dive back's going to get the ball unless you press X to pull the ball. And that's a bit of different situation than before. So here we got Air Force, and then you got 2 other pitches. So you can basically, it's the same as when you're passing. The length of your button press will determine how hard you pitch the ball. And then how hard you pitch the ball will determine how risky the pitch is as well. So it's still your L1, R1 buttons as you're pitching, but how deep you depress the button, how long you depress the button will determine how quick that pitch is, or how risky that pitch is. But again, let me show you that again. So you got the Air Force one, and then here's a Michigan read option play. So you see the back is getting the ball there. If you pressed X in that situation, you would pull that ball and the quarterback, but in the play that it shows, and here's the Air Force play again. We'll get to the Michigan play. In the play that it shows, the quarterback makes the right choice. The back has like 5 yards of green in front of him. But if that defensive end was crashing hard on the back, the quarterback could pull it and he'd have the green space. The other thing, and I don't think I've mentioned this in any of the other videos, and I wanted to point this out because this is a very popular play and so many teams have this play in now. And I was actually a little concerned when I saw it, like, how does it work? So, the jet motion play where you have the receiver coming across the formation, and as he's getting to the quarterback, they snap the ball and the quarterback kind of pops it to him. So that is statistically a pass. That is always called, like, you have to count that in receiving yards. You count that as a completion because it is a forward pass. Like, It's sort of offensive coordinators found a little hack where if you mess up that play, it's just an incomplete pass instead of a fumble. So that's why they do it that way. They want it to be officially a forward pass because you benefit from not losing yardage if you drop it. So this play is in a lot of playbooks. My concern was, okay, how do you get the timing of this right? Because does that receiver have a button press affiliated with him? Like, is he the X or is he the circle the triangle running across the screen and I've got to hit him, or is the R1? No, you don't have to worry about that. On that particular play, which does count as a pass, you don't have to do anything. It will just give him the ball and then he takes off running. So I was concerned about that because I was like, I'm going to mess up the timing of this. Like, if I'm playing as a worse team, there is no way I'm going to be able to get this right. But it was actually pretty easy. So I was surprised by that. One other thing before we go, I've talked about this a couple times. Now I'm going to show it to you. The pass meter. So in the game, while you are throwing, you get a meter, much like your kicking meter, that will show you the gauge of how hard you're throwing the ball. Like, you can throw, if you want to go light, you can throw it up over the top of the defense. If you want to throw a laser beam, you're going to hit the button hard. But you'll now see it in graphic form on the screen when you're making that decision. And I think that's helpful. I know some people have said, well, how do I turn that off? I actually think it's pretty helpful. I liked using it when I was playing. It did help me kind of figure out how to feather the ball a little bit more because there are going to be situations where you do want to layer it and throw it up over the defense and let it drop into the receiver's hands. And there's other ones where he's wide open down the field and you just want to fire a laser beam. So you've got that option. And I do feel like it's easier to see now, but it's going to be interesting. I'm sure there will be things that people love, that people hate, but there's a lot going on in this game. And let's see. It's June 14th. Depending on what version you ordered, 2 days from now, you could be a month away from having it in your hot little hands. But July 19th, I believe is the regular release date. July 16th, if you bought the deluxe edition or the bundle with Madden. I am very curious now. I'm a little mad at the SEC because SEC Media Days happening right when the thing comes out. Like, I can't steal my son's PlayStation and take it to Dallas for SEC Media Days because he would kill me because he couldn't play the game right away. So yeah, it's going to be a couple days for me before you get your full-on review of the game because I will be at SEC Media Days. So I'm sorry about that, but let's just plan better next year, SEC. How's that sound? Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening in podcast form. Thank you for being here. Like and subscribe if you like the show. Please tell a friend if you like the show. I'm on vacation next week, but that doesn't mean you're not getting shows. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we will have shows. So Monday, Clark Brooks and I talking all the big returning quarterbacks in college football this year. Clark is the SEC stat cat. He did a deep dive, video and advanced stats into pretty much every major starting returning quarterback. And it is fascinating stuff. A lot of things that you probably weren't thinking about when we were talking about all these quarterbacks. We'll talk to Clark about that. On Wednesday, we start the My Favorite Games series. And boy, is this going to be fun. Brent Hubbs of VolQuest will talk about his favorite Tennessee game. Chris Ballas of the Wolverine will talk about his favorite Michigan game. On Friday, more My Favorite Games. We've got Jake Rowe from Dogs HQ talking about his favorite Georgia game. And Spencer Holbrook from Letterman Row talking about his favorite Ohio State game. So lots of fun. Those shows were so much fun to record, those My Favorite Games. So if you listen and you're like, well, you didn't do my favorite team, don't worry. We're going to do a couple more throughout the course of the summer because I had such a good time reliving those games, rewatching those games. We've got to do more just because it's so much fun. And I think you guys are going to really enjoy it too, even if it's not your favorite team. Now, Alabama and Ohio State, I will say you catch some strays losing in some of these games because when you lose, it's a big deal. But don't worry. We've got the Ohio State favorite game. We will get to the Crimson Tide favorite game where Alabama wins. Don't worry, we'll get to it. But thanks so much, and I'll talk to you live again a week from Monday.